Hello guys, and welcome to a new Wargame video today by me, Vulcan, and Val.
Hello.
Today we have the last game of a best of three between Crna Buksna and the Refugees. This is the last round of the lowest bracket of the 3v3 Reddit tournament, and after the last game where we saw Crna Buksna win, they brought it back to 1-1 in the best of three. So all to play for in this game. Whoever wins this game will move on to the final to face ANZ, and that will be amazing for either team because they have a chance of winning the prize pool of the tournament. But either way, what are your thoughts to begin with, Val?
I'm going to be interested to see how these teams change up because last game was kind of just a slow victory for Crna Buksna. They got a bit of a lead at the start and they never really relinquished that hold on the hotel sector. So we'll have to see if they decide for kind of they could do something a bit crazy. You know, we could do a push into India or Bravo for either team, which we don't usually see. I think it'll probably pan out the same as last game in a way. We'll probably have the same sort of starts and then we'll have maybe a bit more adaptation as the game goes on.
Yeah, so we are seeing Paddy field again, but this time round the teams have swapped sides. So over on the blue side we have Crna Buksna with Razman, Dirty D and Firestarter, and over on the red side we have Austrian Oak and Barry Dillon and Future Pro from the Refugees. So what sort of decks are we looking at?
So we have exactly the same deck as last time. Razman on a Scandi deck, Dirty D on a motorized NATO deck, and Firestarter on a motorized armor deck, and that deck definitely did work for them last game. Austrian Oak with a Soviet deck, Barry Dillon with a Eastern Bloc deck, and Future Pro with a USSR deck.
Okay, and it looks like in this game Barry Dillon's going back to the tried and tested strategy of a lot of helicopters at the start of the game, which is something that I was pleased he didn't do in the last game. It showed that he can be a lot more versatile in his playstyle. He did come out with a lot of helicopters at one point in the game, which did completely prevent a push out of Firestarter, so that was kind of warranted. But this starting with a lot of helicopters from the start of the game actually hasn't been working out too well for him. So it'll be interesting to see if he can pull it off in this game. Looks like he's going to be going for that India push and try and take control of the top two sectors on the map. What else can we see across the map?
Well, Dirty D is reading this really well because he has 4 Gazelle Celtics just waiting for this push to come across. And I think he's probably thought about this, and because they didn't do the same thing last game. They only brought 1 Celtic, I believe, and that was on, I think, the bot side. So I think Dirty D's thinking to himself, Barry Dillon didn't play his usual airborne start last game, but we won. So he's probably kind of expecting Barry Dillon to go back to his sort of modus operandi, which is this large helicopter start. And the only place really that's a good helicopter attack from the red side is into India, because Lima and Hotel just aren't very good landing zones for helicopters, really.
Yeah, so those Celtics will probably follow up on the defenders at the start of the game, and as soon as they spot those helicopters coming to India, they will converge on those units. So it doesn't look like Barry Dillon's going to have a fun time in this one. Down in this bottom side again, Firestarter going with his standard setup, although it looks like he is still going to be using a Kari Marishiki. I couldn't quite see it amongst the rest of his units. So the 3K1 start with the Kari Marishiki, the Noah once again, we've got the Chaparral. It's pretty much exactly the same start coming out of Firestarter into this bottom side, and like I said in the last one, it's just because it's such a good composition of units, very strong for holding out in the open at the start of the game, especially when there aren't going to be too many MiG-27s hanging about. And that's going to be replied by Future Pro, who's bringing in these BTRDs with the Conkers M squads, and he does have a Sturm in there, which is a unit that you don't see very often anymore, but definitely still has a very good ATGM, which will be able to pick off those K1s at the start of the game.
Yeah, the Sturm, it's fallen out of favour a bit. I mean, I saw lots of use back in ALB, I believe. It was a really, really often used unit because of its range, but the damage on the ATGM just isn't particularly amazing. I'm a bit surprised he's not brought any heavy tanks out at the start. Although maybe what he's doing is he's buying maybe a MiG-27 or two instead of those super heavy tanks.
Yeah, maybe, but we've also got to remember that how well Barry Dillon's Wilkes did. Like, having those in his composition was such a good idea. He managed to hold back quite a lot of the advancing infantry that was probing the tree line in that game with just the Wilkes alone, and not having any heavy tanks really to support the push on that bottom side is going to be incredibly risky, because if the tanks get the advantage, they are just going to roll over those APCs very quickly.
Yeah, that's what's happened pretty much every time. It's every time the Red 4 ATGMs run out of ammunition, or they're not microed quite correctly, you just have tanks, they just roll straight in and start one or two shotting these APCs and ATGM carriers, which is a real danger, really.
Yeah, so Barry Dillon's push is underway, and all to play for in this last game of the best of three. We see that Salamandra is going to probably end up spotting these Celtics moving towards India, and the Celtics need to make sure that they don't get shot down by the Mi-24Ps. Barry Dillon's got to make sure he doesn't focus the scout defenders too much, because that's basically going to give the initiative to the Celtics if he's not too careful. But so far, so good. Shot down almost all three of the Celtics, and basically all of his aircraft are remaining alive. One helicopter did go down, but the Mi-17s have got into position now, and those are going to drop probably Gorna Strelki, which is going to make it incredibly hard for this force out of Dirty D to push into that town. But no, it's going to be Leka Pahota, of course, because he is Eastern Bloc. Yeah, my bad. So, either way, these heat rockets still have a reasonable amount of range, 1,400 meters, so they are pretty deadly against APCs still. But Leka Pahota not going to hold up much against fullscreen Jaegers, which are coming out of Dirty D. However, the Mi-17s definitely preventing that infantry push at the moment. Also, the Mi-8 TV on the other side there is not going to make things easy either.
That's true, but he doesn't really have anything coming up to support. He's got this Wilk. I'm not sure what he's doing with that, because there was a Smirch strike, or not Smirch, should I say, an MT-70 strike from Razman at the start, landed right on the bridge from Bravo to Alpha, and that's really delayed some of these units getting through.
Yeah, this bottom side, Firestarter's finally getting his forces together. The K1's coming into range of a lot of these APCs, and that is pretty dangerous. Su-27M is coming in and is going to take out a couple of units. Actually destroyed one of the chaparrals on the water there, which is going to, I was going to say guarantee its escape, until a Noah comes in with the Ihawk missile and shoots that right down. So Su-27M lost at the start of the game, which is pretty crazy, especially if they don't have MiG-27s, because they were relying on that aircraft.
Well, I'm kind of confused about it, because I don't see why you'd bring an M when it costs 200 points for a MiG-27M, and as I say that, a beautiful strike kill is another K1 there, but the M is, I'd argue the MiG-27 is better, and you can get two of them for 210 points. That's two of them for 10 more points than one MiG-27M, so...
Yeah, a bit of a confusing choice of unit there, but the MT-70 again being used by Firestarter to panic this push out of Future Pro, the Motor Strelki being held in place, and a lot of the APCs are being slowly taken out by these Kari Marishikis and the RBS 56 squad there. But now we have a returning Uragan, going to be firing back towards the K1 and the Kari Marishiki, I expect, in order to try and stun those in reply.
Well, the MiG-27 does come in, but it hasn't actually managed to target onto anything, and the red team is actually very low on ATGMs here. They've got 2 Conquer squads and 2 Sturms, but apart from that, there's not really anything substantial in this bottom sector.
Yeah, it's good that they still have control of it, though. They've managed to get the ground there in Hotel, as Firestarter's being a bit more careful this time round. Remembers probably the amount of HGMs that were there last time and doesn't necessarily want to run forwards into those if they are there again. But now you can see Barry Dillon's initial push paying off as his reinforcements are arriving at the front line here. His T-72M2 Wilk has managed to drive all the way forwards and catch up to his initial deployed forces from those helicopters. And this MiG-29, oh, those thermobaric napalm rounds, that is huge. Took out a lot of those M8 Panzerbills, which were going to be hell for the Leka Bohota, and now the Gvarman are in the open and being taken out very quickly by the amount of fire support coming out of this town.
They are, but there is an SK-60B coming in, which is I'm not sure what that's going for. It's not fired its missiles yet, so it looks like it didn't fire at all. Maybe going for that Bertino, but nearly gets taken out.
Yeah, I think it probably would have been going for some of the infantry squads, but that Bertino there, quite nicely placed, did manage to do a little bit of damage to a Gvarman squad, I think. But I think one of the missiles landed directly on top of the Leka Bohota, so it's actually holding the Gvarman in place for a little while. But eventually the Leka Bohota squad goes down, but still not any significant ground made by Dirty D in this top side at India, and at the moment the refugees still leading with a +1 conquest lead.
They are indeed, and it looks like even though I don't think they have a particularly strong hold on Hotel, they still hold it. They have their ATGMs tucked away in the middle tree line in these stems, but I mean that's probably going to change very quickly with all those K1s and Kimaras coming in.
Yeah, we've got the AMX 3090 there, being chosen by Firestarter as a recon tank. Looks like he might try and use that to find out what he is up against. The JSDF Rangers as well, also going to be able to advance without being targeted by Conquer's M's, of course, so as long as there isn't any other APCs, he can probably get those JSDF Rangers pretty close and reveal units to be destroyed. And in this top side, looks like Dirty D's push has been stopped in its tracks. Just one Gvarman squad left, and the T-72 M2 Wilk is still advancing, and that will probably take out the Mistral squad. So, nice amount of damage done here by Barry Dillon, and he's done a fantastic job of gaining this much ground in the top side of the map. That's exactly what he was going for with that initial helicopter push. Those Celtics just didn't hold up against the Mi-24s.
Well, this is always the thing to be considered. Those Mi-24Ps, I believe they are, where they have 10 HP and they have decent armor. Or actually, yeah, no, they're just 10 HP in one front and side armor. So they can take 2 shots from a Mistral, the Mistral that's carried on the Celtics, but the Celtic only has 4 HP, so 1 shot from Mi-24P will down it. And it just goes to show, Red 4 at the moment has much better air helicopters, just in general, I believe.
Yeah, so over the map in general, the refugees in a huge lead, actually. Austrian Oaks are going to want to get this UAZ into Echo as quickly as possible and extend their lead to a +3 lead, which would be insane, and will get them well ahead in this game. Firestarter's really going to want to do something in this bottom side once he sort of regroups with a few more K1s and the Kayamari Shikis. I reckon he'll be able to push quite significantly into Hotel against all these Conquer's M squads, because they are going to just get taken out with 1 shot from a tank. And there still isn't any super heavy tanks down at the bottom here from Future Pro. Even if he had one in reserve, just in case Firestarter started to push, but Firestarter definitely has the firepower to make this work. Obviously he can't see what we can see, because a lot of these units are hidden because they are small, and you can see the Kayamari Shiki there moving on its own is in a desperate position. It's only on 3 health, being hit by multiple ATGMs. Probably only needs to get hit a couple more times and that will go down, but fortunately Firestarter getting that out of there quick enough. SK-60B from Razman trying to do some damage to some infantry squads. Tunguskaram not quite in range to finish that off, so that is going to get out alive as well.
It's going to get out alive, but I mean, if Firestarter doesn't do something quickly on this bottom side, and they're at a -3 disadvantage here, this game could be over very quickly in the refugees' favour.
Yeah, so the SDRF 9040 of Razman, they're starting to make a little bit of ground into India again, but it just looks like there's so many units up here. It's actually quite hard to to push back into India now for Dirty D. He's just going to have to organise quite a lot of forces, maybe some smoke and so on. He's actually bringing in some HS-30 mortars there, which will be able to provide smoke, will allow him to get his infantry into that town and start to deal with those Lekapahota and the Motschutzen. And if he can get his control back on the town in India, that's going to make things a lot easier for him, and they can start to neutralise those command units that are getting the lead at the moment.
You can't, but like even if they neutralise India, they're still at -2. Although then again, there is a CV going to Lima, so then they'd be at -1 if they neutralise India.
Well, I'm saying if they neutralise the CV in India, then they can take it themselves, can't they? So, and that will also allow them to continue the push through there because they'll have the presence in the town, which will stop a lot of these APCs. It looks like there's a lot more than there actually is there, to be honest, because if you look at the SPW80s, what are they going to do? Like, let's be honest. BTRDs, again, it's just because he hasn't decided to like waste his APCs. And now the smoke is coming in, and that's going to screen for the XA186s to push into the town. So Dirty D, that's exactly what he's going to do. Probably going to bring out the FSK and try and make a significant push into India to try and get that back.
Although he's moving forward with that 6-man of FSK, the 2 squads are down to 3 men each, but I mean this is kind of interesting because you very rarely see smoke used in this way, and I'm not sure if I like it that much because you cut off your own fire support from attacking the town for you. But I guess maybe in this case he believes there's a lot more infantry in the town than he thought there was, and his fire support just wouldn't be able to hold up. So.
Well, I think he's more concerned about their fire support than his own, which is why he's using smoke in this case. Also, he doesn't have much of his own fire support, and he wants these XA186s to have a free run into the town to drop off those stormers and really deal some damage to this infantry. I think it's all about just getting the presence here in this town, and then he can sort of sweep around the smoke himself and start to deal with the rest of the units there, because a lot of these units, again, they're not very high quality, they're just leftover APCs. And SK60B, they actually took out the artillery piece, the BM24. So that was a nice hit from the SK60B there, especially considering they don't cost much at all. And it seems this has worked so far. Dirty D is getting a presence, but his stormers running through a napalm at the moment, trying to get as close as they can to the enemy command unit. Down in this bottom side...
I was about to say, we've been looking at the top side, there's been a lot of action going on down here.
Yeah, the fire starters push forwards with his K1s and the Kaimaris, and he's just overran the HGMs completely. I told you he had a lot of firepower, and it certainly worked out, as he has now made so much ground in this bottom side. His armoured deck really coming into play here against Future Pro's units, and Future Pro's just definitely not going to be able to build up enough to prevent this from continuing. And bringing those BMP3s into gun range of the tanks as well is just going to allow them to die. The T-72 was taken out in Hotel, and this MiG-27S is just going to do no damage at all to the rest of those units. Maybe take out the Government squad, but that's about it. And now Firestarter literally controls the entirety of the bottom side of this map, and that's completely negated the lead that the refugees had built up. They still, of course, are in the lead in terms of 305 conquest points, but they have none coming in anymore, and soon Firestarter is going to be able to capture Hotel and bring them to a +1 lead.
Well, this is such a risky play by the blue team, and I say that because look at the forces in Lima in the middle. There's absolutely nothing there for the blue team, and I guess that, you know, obviously the way that pressure works, if you apply enough on your side of the map, but you know, there's so many red side forces in the Echo area that could push into Lima, but they just seem to be a bit afraid to do so, and at the same time they're also losing India, so I think they need to seize this opportunity now, which it looks like they actually are. As I say that, they're moving their units forward, because it really is, you know, they have no chance of holding the bottom side right now, I believe.
Yeah, they've got to apply some pressure somewhere else on the map, and moving into Lima now would be a good idea in order to force Firestarter to react to that. In this top side, a couple really nice strikes came in from the thermobaric MiGs, and they managed to take out a nice amount of infantry in India, which is going to prevent Dirty D from overextending towards Bravo. And it looks like Barry Dillon does have quite a few forces there that is going to deal with any units that continue to push anyway. But now Razman using a Fighting Falcon, 2 1,000 kilogram bombs there, trying to prevent any pushes on the road. But already the Su-122s and the BTRDs are making ground towards Lima. And he's also following that up with 2 VDV-90 squads. The SCRF 9040s though might fend off this push quite nicely, because they do have those 40mm autocannons that do tons of damage.
They do, but those VDV have an RPG launcher that does even more tons of damage, so I do believe the red team will at least manage to get a small foothold, but they do have to be careful, because while this is going on, Firestar is moving troops onto the red team side of the river near Gulf, and if they lose Gulf, this game is over, pretty much.
Yeah. For this RBS 56 squad that Razman has near Lima, that did actually do quite a lot of damage, so that's going to slow down the push towards Lima. And Razman does have an STRF 103D there, which is going to be able to start to do a lot of damage to these VDV squads. That has a high rate of fire of 15 rounds per minute, so definitely a good defensive unit to take down these infantry squads, unless the T-64 BV has something to say about that.
That's true indeed, and it looks like the blue team is they're kind of holding on with this STRV, but that BV is unfortunately going to eat it for dinner, really. So, I mean, it is quite dangerous as well, because while I believe they have to make a play like this, they're also at massive risk of a flank from the bottom side, and I think Firestar is probably going to make brutal use of that with all these Jaegers and all of his tanks pushing up into Delta.
Yeah, he's got one M1A1 Abrams there, the Challenger 1 Mark III. He's got a Kai Marishiki that's actually moving up as well. And those are all going to have 3 shots into this push coming out of Echo. And basically, Austrianoke's not going to have much of a chance to try and find this command unit in Lima. So this push is almost pointless, because they aren't going to be getting any sort of conquest lead out of this. And the +1 lead is now sitting there for the blue side. Crna Buksna starting to get some points on the board and starting to catch up with the refugees' 305 point conquest lead.
Yeah, I mean, after what looked like such a nice start for the refugees as well in this game, they've really... I just don't think they appreciated just how dangerous Firestar's forces on this bottom side were. You know, we had so many tanks, and Future Pro had, I mean, literally no tanks. I think the only tank he had down there was a command tank. And it just didn't have the staying power, and now they're paying for it with this massive hook that's coming up through into Delta and Echo.
Yeah, well, the massive difference down there is the fact that, yeah, an ATGM can fire at a tank from like 500 plus meters, like more than the other tank's range, but also the fact that you can't forget that a tank, as soon as it spots an HGM squad, will just one-shot it. And a tank, meanwhile, can take like 4 or 5 shots from the same HGM. So that just doesn't add up, especially when Firestarter is going to be running at them with multiple K1s and Kaimarishikis. And that's exactly what happened. And I think at the bottom side there, Future Pro just completely dropped the ball by not bringing in any heavy tanks or like super heavies. And now Austrianoke's having a hard time in the middle because of that mistake. Firestarter can just push up and completely flank all of these forces. Some really nice airstrikes coming in as well. And meanwhile, Dirty D making the perfect choice in the top side to smoke the town and push the infantry in there, get the presence, allow him to get rid of the CV there, get the conquest lead back. And overall, just the series of plays has just paid off completely. And now Austrianoke is looking to lose this command unit in Delta.
He really is. I mean, this just goes back to some of the early decisions that we saw. You know, yes, there was a brilliant red push into India, and Dirty D and Razman did a beautiful job of returning that. But when you don't spend any money on tanks and you spend it on a MiG-27M, Su-27M that gets shot down after killing, I think, 1 unit, that's when you know that you're going to have a bad time in hotel. So it really has it started tumbling out of control for them.
Yeah, just not having the MiG-27s available down on the bottom side has made things incredibly hard. and it's not going to get any easier as Firestarter has his RBS squad covering the bridge on the bottom side at Hotel, whilst he moves the rest of his tanks up towards Echo, and is going to find that command unit in Delta. So 2 more neutralized sectors, and I wouldn't be surprised to see actually command units coming in to try and capture those. MiG-27 finally appearing, but getting shot down immediately by the Noah. So one of those down. And yeah, things just not looking good. It's completely falling apart for the red side. Barry Dillon made a massive push and a very good push at the start, but now it's just being completely crushed as they are being surrounded in like the top right part of the map.
Yeah, I mean, I think they just made the large mistake of really, well, not respecting Firestarter's overwhelming firepower on this bottom side. And obviously, I mean, the game's not over yet, but you know, they really didn't respect that. And they also put so many units into Echo and the bottom of that forest just above Echo, and they never really used it. They only pushed when they got pushed out of India. And they really lost an opportunity there, I think, to put some pressure of their own onto Lima. But this is the way the game's gone, and I really think that despite the deficit in points, that the Crna Buksna is just going to win this with this 2+ tick, because they just seem to have such a commanding position here.
Yeah, I think they've still got to be careful. Firestarter has got to play this slowly, I think, because there's a lot of aircraft coming out of the red side at the moment, and he did lose a couple of his anti-air units. He lost a Noah and a Gepard, so that was a pretty big blow by the big 25 BM, and now he's got to be careful. The Chaparral should be able to cover him reasonably well, but his other Noah is out of ammunition at the moment, so any airstrikes from like the Su-22 like Seria 30s could do a lot of damage to the rest of his tanks if they are caught out in the open. But another artillery strike coming into the centre now, and that's going to leave a lot of those units vulnerable because they are now panicked. And as soon as they decide to make a proper push into Echo, things are going to go downhill again.
Yeah, we see these Jaeger coming in, and Jaeger are absolutely fantastic 30-point recon infantry, Danish recon infantry, and they're going to make some short work of these VDV and Spetsnaz, both of them being depleted squads.
Yeah, also we got the reinforcements of the XA-186s from Dirty D sitting in Lima behind the 4 Hachi Nanashikis, and I think as soon as we see the push coming up from Razman into this bottom side town, a lot of those units are going to start moving to the right with the STRV-121 and start dealing a lot of damage and getting a lot of ground.
We do. We've even seen a Leopard 1 command tank come in as well, which is a slightly preemptive choice, but I think it's always nice to be able to have it on hand for, because I mean I'm pretty sure they know that they're going to secure the sector now. There's very little that the red team has that can actually stop them, but
look at this in the top side at India. Looks like a Smirch barrage did manage to pick off the command unit in India, which means that they lost the command unit there, and that's going to slow down the conquest lead out of the blue side. But all the ground that's being made right now, I don't think that's going to matter for too long. We've already got Razman bringing up another command vehicle to recapture India, so they'll be on a +4 lead very soon, currently on a +3 lead after capturing Echo, and with more artillery coming into the centre here, again, more panicked units going to be taken out very quickly by the elite FSK and Jaeger squads.
I think this game has been a really, really good example of one of those games where no matter how the start of the game goes, it just goes to show that if you build up enough troops, you can really kind of just solidly steamroll straight through an area, as an SDRV-121 gets a CV there, but you can just keep going through. Like Firestarter did, he took Hotel, but he wasn't satisfied with Hotel, he hooked up into Echo and Delta, and it really goes to show just how a lead can switch very quickly if you manage your units correctly, I guess.
Yeah, and also on the fact on the refugee side, they just got complacent. It looked like they had a lot more units than they had in terms of value in India, and I think that caught them out. A lot of their APCs were there, and they were almost useless when the push came in. So that's something you've got to sort of look at and be aware of in this sort of game. And the same happened at Hotel. I think FuturePro definitely overvalued his units in comparison to Firestarter, and it basically led to this huge disparity of units on the map now that we can see, because Firestarter's units are just worth so much more.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like you said before, ATGMs are great until they get one-shot by a tank, so you really, really have to be careful of that.
Yeah, and this Seria 30, it's just not doing the job. The two TV guidance missiles there, I think one of them missed the Abrams and the other one hit, and it left the Abrams on 1 health, and now that's just going to go back and get repaired. So, yeah, without those MiG-27s in play, it's just so hard to deal with this many heavy tanks coming out of Firestarter and his armoured deck, and I really just love the use of this armoured deck. I've always been a fan of armoured decks. And it's just great to see them being used so efficiently.
It definitely is. I mean, it's always a pleasure to watch people, like Firestarter, very good players play. But I think, like you said, these armored decks are some really, really fun to watch and really interesting decks, because these super heavy tanks and heavy tanks, they do take a lot of they take a lot of micro skill to use correctly. But when they are used correctly, they are so formidable.
Yeah. So SGRV-121 is being used by Razman to try and deal some damage to Barry Dillon. They're trying to push back as much as they can. Ostrinoke's actually got a T-72BU there, and T-72M1D is going to try and get back into Echo to stem this +4 lead. But honestly, with this Lynx coming in with another command unit for Delta, things are going to end pretty quickly. Currently, the +4 lead means that this game should be over in just a couple of minutes, really. And the AH-1J is being forced across the map towards Gulf, running into the OSA AKM, and are going to get shot down. So another CV safe for now.
Yep, that Celtic though manages to take out a cooler and then an Mi-17, but that OSA is probably going to make short work of it though.
Yeah, so hero Celtic, but unfortunately gets shot down. And yeah, that's pretty much it, really. For Crna Buksna, they have won their place in the final, pretty much.
Oh, poor Austrianoke, rip refugee dream. Europe refused to have us in the end. That's the last spam ping we'll see out of them for a while, unfortunately. So farewell, refugee spam pings. Maybe in another lifetime we'll meet again.
Yeah, commiserations to the refugees. I really think that they played this well at the start of the game, but just overvalued their units, and that's what let them down at the end of the day. So, yeah, just another really good game to finish off this best of 3 series. I think we are going to see the game come to a close very shortly. +5 points. It looks like the refugees are going to allow it to go to a 500-point conquest win. So just with Barry Dillon's display of BM24s, that is the end of the last round game of the lower bracket. And yeah, well played to both teams. So after 27 minutes and 55 seconds, Crna Buksna are going to take the win for the last game of the best of 3 and move on to the final of the 3v3 Reddit tournament.
I'm really looking forward to that game. I think ANZ and Crna Buksna are probably the 2 best teams in the tournament. I mean, they have ended up in the final, so that's going without being said. But it's they're 2 fantastic teams. They've proven to be exceptionally good at the game, exceptionally good in these 3v3 scenarios, and I'm sure we'll see some great games. But commiserations again to the refugees. They played some good games. That first game especially was a very out-of-the-box strategy, and I quite liked that from Barry Dillon. And even this game, he had quite a good KD, so he did have a good start. But unfortunately, they just couldn't hold it, and that bottom side in Hotel just lost them the game basically. So a bit of a shame there.
I think it's just really nice to see the refugees helicopter strategies just finally pay off. There's been so many games where we've seen Barry Dillon start with a load of helicopters and they just get shot down, and that's pretty much the refugees out of the game. But in this time round, in this series of 3 games, every time Barry Dillon's helicopters have definitely made an impressive impact on the game that we didn't necessarily expect. So in the first game, we saw them manage to take over Alpha on straight to the point, and that was decisive in winning that game. And in the second game, the helicopters were used to counter some of the more important pushes out of Firestarter on the bottom side of Paddy Field. And in this game, we saw Barry Dillon with his helicopters do a great job in the top side of the map. And as much as we've been sort of saying that he should change his strategy, I think in this last best of 3, he's definitely shown us how it can work. And I really sort of appreciate that out of him, and his sort of commitment to his play style.
Hey, never give up the dream.
Exactly. And it's just, commiserations to the refugees. They definitely put up a massive fight all the way to the end, but that is going to be them knocked out of the tournament while Crna Buksna moves on to this final game and final round. So, anything else you'd like to say?
Not really, I think. Just a good game, a really good series. One of the best ones I've cast, I think. I've really enjoyed this one. And I can't wait for the finals. It'll be fantastic, I think.
Yeah, definitely a fun series to cast, but that's all for now, guys. So hopefully you've enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next best of 3. Goodbye.
Bye.